The old house was enormous. It wasn't large enough to be a mansion, but it was much larger than any of the houses in town. No one knew who had built it, or how long it had been there. The house had been around long before the town had been built, although it had been in better shape then. Now it was a dilapidated ruin. Portions of the roof were caved in. The windows had long since been broken out by animals and curious souls. The townsfolk stayed away from the house. As was the case with ancient places, there were stories. Elders told wide-eyed young boys and girls of the monstrous lich who walked the grounds of that house, the twisted spirit of an old wizard who cheated death by devouring the souls of the innocent. Mothers turned it into a cautionary tale to make those wide-eyed children behave. Most of the townsfolk, if asked, would claim not to believe the stories. Yet, even the biggest skeptics stayed away from the old house. Nicholas and Serena were the exception, each for a different reason. Nicholas, the younger of the two, was enamored with the idea of finding the ancient wizard, despite his alleged propensity for eating souls. Serena came along to make sure her brother was safe, and to prove to him that the house was just that, a house. The two of them pushed open the doors to the ancient house and crept inside. Nicholas went from room to room, pushing aside what was left of doors and quietly calling for the lich. Serena wasn't quite sure why they were being quiet. There was no one to disturb. She waited in the front hall as Nicholas finished searching the adjacent rooms. "See? No lich, no wizard. Are you satisfied?" Serena whispered nervously, before sternly reminding herself that there was neither need to whisper nor to be nervous. "We've only covered a few rooms. There's still the whole house left. I'm sure he's here somewhere." Nicholas scampered off, hopping over a fallen beam. "Nicholas, wait!" Serena hurried after him, but her dress caught on the broken edge of a beam as she climbed over. The unexpected resistance sent her tumbling, and the aged, weakened floor beneath her gave way as she crashed into it. Her scream came out as a startled squeak as she fell into the basement. She landed hard on her knees, the bones cracking upon impact with the hard stone. She lay on the floor, screaming silently with shock, with pain, and unable to move. At least, that's what should have happened. Instead, her fall slowed, until she came to rest gently on the ground, completely unharmed. Serena was still for a moment, unsure of the reality of what she had just experienced. She slowly stood, then examined herself. She was indeed unharmed. This was impossible. Unless the stories were true, magic would make many things possible. She shook her head, brushing the thought out as quickly as it slipped in. There was no magic, no lich, and the stories were just stories. In any case, she needed to get back up to Nicholas. If he couldn't find her, it wouldn't take him long to get scared. The basement was much larger than Serena thought it should be, but then again, this was a large house. In some spots, the floor above had crumbled away, allowing just enough moonlight to slip in for her to see roughly where she was going. She wandered for what felt like the better part of a half hour, trying to find stairs, or a ladder, or something to lead back up to the ground floor. Who in the world needs a basement this big? Serena asked herself, annoyed. All I need is a set of stairs, or a ladder. Something. How did anyone ever get down here if there's no stairs? Before she had even finished, she turned a corner to find a set of stone stairs leading up to an open door. She paused for a moment, her earlier thought once again sneaking into her mind. What if the stories really were true? It certainly seemed like this house was helping her. First her strange fall, now stairs appearing where she requested them. It took a bit more effort to force the thought down this time. This wasn't magic, this was simply coincidence. The stories about this house were causing her imagination to overreact. She needed to find Nicholas so they could go home. They needed to get home before sunrise. The stairs led to a hallway at the back of the house, and Serena could see a garden through one of the windows. It was a beautiful, well-kept garden, but Serena didn't have time to admire it. "Nicholas!" she called, trying to find her way back to the front of the house. "Nicholas, where are you?" "Shh!" came the reply. "Oh, Nicholas, come on. There's no one here. It doesn't matter. We don't want the wizard to find us. We're trying to find him, remember?" She shook her head, grinning as she followed her brother's voice. "There's no wizard. Like I said, this house is empty. Anyway, we need to go. We need to get back home before Mother wakes up." "But we haven't searched upstairs yet," Nicholas protested. "We don't have time," Serena said, steering Nicholas back toward the main hall. "Can we come back tomorrow night?" he insisted, his eyes pleading. "I'll think about it." Nicholas grinned, and Serena groaned inwardly as she thought of a second sleepless night searching this ruined house. "Leaving already? Shame, you almost found me." Both of them whirled, Serena shifting so she stood in front of her brother. He was a skeleton, wrapped in the ragged remains of a cloak. It stood tall, well over 6 feet, and its empty eye sockets glowed like embers. While not as imposing as the stories made him out to be, the very fact of his existence was enough to terrify the children. Nicholas screamed and bolted for the door, tripping over his own feet after only a few steps. Serena stood frozen, unable to move or look away. The Lich knelt, yet didn't approach. His eyes dimmed to a gentle radiance, and he held out a skeletal hand, palm up. Or at least it would be if he had a palm, and slowly reached out. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." Stay back," Serena mumbled, her legs finally budging just a bit. "Don't hurt me," she pleaded. She felt tears forming at the corners of her eyes, and Nicholas was already wailing, tugging on her arm, trying to pull her away. The creature sighed awkwardly. "I don't know why I expected that to work. It never does." Its voice boomed, so even the softest words rolled over them like thunder. The Lich shifted from kneeling to sitting, groaning as he did so. It paused and cocked its head, as if considering. Head or skull? Serena didn't quite know what the proper term would be for it. She settled on head before wondering why she was taking the time to ponder this. "Would you believe that even the undead feel old sometimes?" the Lich asked, his ember eyes flaring in what Nicholas would swear later was a twinkle. "I may not have muscle or skin, but that doesn't seem to stop the aches." He chuckled, a deep, all-encompassing noise that seemed to carry its own gentle warmth. Despite themselves, the siblings slowly felt a bit more at ease, if only a bit. Suddenly, the Lich stood, a strange thing to witness, given the contrast between his height and substance, or lack thereof. "Would you like to see my garden?" Serena and Nicholas exchanged a glance. Will you eat us?" Nicholas asked. "Eat you?" the Lich replied, incredulous. The village elders said you're a wizard that eats the souls of the innocent." The Lich chuckled ruefully, Is that really something they're telling children these days? Another sigh. You're far too young to be hearing about something as awful as that. The Lich tapped its fingers against its skull, a gesture Serena found odd. I won't eat you, don't worry. What good would it do me? I'm already dead. With that, it lumbered away toward the back of the house. Serena and Nicholas exchanged one more uncertain glance, then slowly followed the Lich. Seeing the garden for a second time, Serena realized something she had noticed, but not registered, before. The garden was very well kept. There were no weeds, despite the garden's size, and flowers of every type bathed in the moonlight in color-coordinated sections. Most of the flowers were shades of blue or purple, with a smattering of red here and there. She felt her fear melt away, replaced by a feeling of tranquility. It really was a beautiful garden. Nicholas, in honesty, couldn't care less about flowers. He was far more interested in adventure, in finding imaginary hidden treasures, or saving the town from imaginary fire-breathing dragons. Yet even he found himself enraptured by the flowers. They were beautiful, and something about them made him feel peaceful, like everything would be all right. Even the Lich didn't scare him anymore. The Lich observed their reactions, nodding with satisfaction. He sat between them, his cloak belying his slight frame. The siblings had never seen anything manage to be both big and small at the same time. Are you really a wizard? Nicholas asked, his calm giving rise to his boyish curiosity. Everyone says you're a wizard. Do you live here? Why is everything broken? The Lich was quiet for a moment. My name is Ezekiel, he finally responded. You have a name? Serena asked. Of course. I was a man at one time, long, long ago. Serena didn't quite know what to say to that. The stories had all said he was once a man, but it was really only a passing mention. It was hard to imagine the monster in those stories, or even the skeletal creature in front of her, ever being a man. Were you always this tall? Nicholas queried. Ezekiel chuckled, his thundering laugh oddly comforting. He tapped his fingers on his head again, bone clicking against bone. I'd love to say I was, but truth be told, this prodigious height only came after I became undead. Were you short? Nicholas pressed. I was average, Ezekiel replied. Were you the wizard? Serena repeated Nicholas's earlier question. Now that they had met the Lich, she couldn't stop thinking about her slowed fall, the stairs that seemed to appear at her request. His very existence meant what happened to her really happened. The impossible, magic, really happened. Ezekiel was quiet again. He didn't say anything for a few minutes. Both siblings leaned toward him unconsciously, their anticipation growing the longer the silence stretched on. Finally, he spoke. I will tell you the story of the wizard. Nicholas cheered and scooted closer, excited. Ezekiel's eyes flared with amusement. Then he began his tale. Once there was a farmer. A farmer? Serena questioned, unable to contain herself. He had avoided their question twice now, and the desire to know was going to burn a hole in her if she didn't find out. I want to know about the wizard. Are you him or aren't you? Ezekiel stood. Well, I was about to tell you about the wizard, but if you don't want to listen, I suppose I can just bid you good night. I'm sure the two of you need to start getting home anyway. Wait, well listen. Nicholas grabbed at the Lich's fingers, glaring at Serena. Ezekiel paused, then slowly sat back down, making sure the two were completely silent before proceeding. So, as I said, there was a farmer. Was he the wizard? Nicholas asked, immediately abandoning his promise to listen. Ezekiel cleared his throat, and Nicholas quickly quashed his rising flow of questions. This farmer was not rich, not by the estimation of most men. He had a small farm, enough crop and livestock to make a little profit. But he had a wife who loved him, and a daughter who adored him. So, in a real sense, he had infinitely more than most men ever have. He lived a blessed life. But you just said he wasn't rich, Serena questioned, confused. Money is a tool. Riches are something else entirely, Ezekiel replied. Remember that, you two. What does the farmer have to do with the wizard? Nicholas asked, eager to get back on track. I'm about to get to that, Ezekiel said, and Serena could see that he was actually enjoying himself. It occurred to her how lonely it must be to spend all his time in this destroyed house, with only his garden to occupy himself. The farmer had a friend, a mighty wizard. They had been friends growing up, before either of them had been anything. And even when the wizard had gone off to study magic, the two stayed friends. The wizard would visit the farmer and his family often, no matter how far away his studies took him. Why didn't the wizard use his magic to make the farmer rich? The Lich considered Serena's question, seemingly phrasing the answer in his mind before speaking. The farmer didn't want him to. He wanted to earn what he got through his own hard work. He felt it would be cheating if someone magicked his crops or his cattle. The wizard and the farmer went on like that for many years, the farmer raising his crops, his cattle, and his family, and the wizard devoting all his time to his studies, learning more and more about magic. He never married, never started a family. For him, there was only his research. One day, the wizard discovered something. Deep beneath his friend's farm was a deposit of magical crystals. Magic crystals are so rare that 1 pound of them will earn a man a lifetime of money. The deposit under his friend's farm could further his research both monetarily and academically for the rest of his life. The only problem was, he would have to tear up the farm to dig it up. He tried to tell the farmer he would be rich enough to buy a farm anywhere he wanted with what he could earn from this, but it didn't mean anything to the farmer. He already had everything he wanted, and he most certainly didn't want anyone tearing up his beloved farm. So, no matter how much the wizard argued, pleaded, or reasoned, the answer was the same. The wizard was outraged. He couldn't believe his friend would do this to him. He needed these crystals. Surely the farmer could understand that. The farmer had his farm and his family. The wizard had his research. How could he deny him the one thing that made him happy? What did the wizard do? Serena asked. She and Nicholas were enthralled by this story of this wizard. Yes, what happened next? Nicholas encouraged, voicing his anticipation alongside his sister. Ezekiel sighed. It was a deep, troubled sigh, as if his skeletal shoulders bore a great weight. He said nothing, and for a long moment, they thought he wasn't going to tell them what happened next. Finally, he spoke. The wizard waited until the fall festival, when the farmer and his family would be in town. And he tore the farm out of the ground. Crops, cattle, barn, even the house. The entire farm? Nicholas's eyes sparkled with wonder. How did he do it? He used a magic crystal. A small piece, only about the size of a teardrop. It amplified his already considerable powers enough to destroy the farm. Did he really need to destroy it? Serena asked. Couldn't he have moved it? Or tunneled to the crystals some other way? Possibly. What did the farmer do when he found out his farm had been destroyed? Nicholas was excited now. He could tell they were nearing the story's climax. He didn't, Ezekiel said quietly. The children stared at him quizzically. You see, what the wizard, in his greed, had failed to do was make certain the farmer and his family actually left for the fall festival. As it turned out, the farmer's daughter had fallen ill a week prior. The farmer and his wife stayed home with her that day to have their own little festival with their daughter. They made her presents and bought her sweets. Her mother had even baked a cake. You mean, Serena said, not finishing. Ezekiel nodded. They died before they even realized what was happening. Serena and Nicholas were silent. The wizard had his crystals. More crystals than he or anyone else would ever need. He was now the richest man in the world. Likely the richest man alive, or to ever live. And his research could flourish as long as he lived. But it didn't matter, because, too late, he realized his happiness was not in his research, but in the friend he could share it with. Now there would be no more visits, no more trinkets for the farmer's daughter, no more home-cooked meals from the farmer's wife, and no more late nights talking and laughing and bickering with his oldest friend. The wizard's actions tormented him. He used his endless fortune and all his research to find a way to undo what he had done. He built a house imbued with magic to aid his research atop the ruins of the farm, and planted the garden you see before you, an homage to his friend's agricultural abilities. He grew older and older, and frailer, but he could not stop until he fixed his mistake. So, according to his instructions, upon his death, he was buried in this garden, in a coffin fashioned from magical crystals. As time passed, his body, and this garden, absorbed the magic, and soon his human body was replaced by one made entirely of residue from the magical crystals, and he returned to the land of the living as a lich, where he continued his research for centuries. Did you succeed? Nicholas asked softly, although he had an idea what the answer would be. The wizard shook his head, unable to voice the words. Even magic has its limits. Even if I brought them back, they would not be who they once were. They would be like me, warped shadows of the people I knew in life. No one spoke. Serena marveled silently. The lich had gone from a soul-eating creature of nightmares and urban legend to a lonely, regretful man who had cost himself the one thing he truly valued. The trio sat in silence, staring at the flowers. The first rays of dawn peeked through the clouds above the garden, creeping towards the flowers. Nicholas and Serena bolted to their feet. "Oh, no," Serena groaned. "We'll never get home before Mother and Father wake up. Mother will be furious." Nicholas turned to Ezekiel. "Is there any chance you'll eat us after all? Please? Maybe just a little?" Ezekiel stared at the children, then burst into laughter. "There is nothing quite as scary as an angry mother, is there?" he said, chuckling. "Not even the undead." He reached into his cloak and pulled out a red satin pouch, tied with gold lacing, which he handed to Nicholas. "Don't worry, I'll send both of you home. Your mother won't even know you were gone." "What's in here, Mr. Wizard?" Nicholas asked, holding up the pouch. "You'll see when you get home," Ezekiel replied, ruffling the boy's hair gently. "And please, just call me Ezekiel." "Will we be able to come see you again?" Serena cut in quickly. She could have sworn that Ezekiel tried to raise a non-existent eyebrow when he looked at her. She supposed old habits did die hard. "You want to visit this place again? To come see a dusty old bag of bones?" She nodded enthusiastically. Ezekiel's eyes flared brightly. "Well then, I suppose I'll have to make this place more presentable next time," he responded, his voice rumbling happily. "Now, off with you rascals!" He swung his arm in a dramatic flourish, and suddenly the children were back in their beds, all signs of their nocturnal excursion gone. Even the dust in Serena's hair from the basement had been removed. The two looked around, then at each other, their faces identical portraits of excitement and wonder. Nicholas still held the pouch, and Serena jumped into his bed, eager to see what was in it. "Go ahead, open it, Nicholas. Let's see what it is." Inside the bag was a large blue crystal, sparkling as spots of white light swirled slowly within it. Nicholas and Serena showed it to their mother, who showed it to their father, who brought it to the jeweler. When weighed by the town jeweler, it would measure out to be exactly 1 pound.